Hey there, it's Michelle from foodslang.com. Thanks for watching this video, and I really appreciate all of you that are listening into the podcast because this week we're talking to Dr. Food, Dr. Julia Mason. She is a pediatric doctor, and she's coming onto the podcast to talk about vitamin D and coronavirus. And this topic is something that is still at the top of the news cycle. It's in the forefront of our minds as we kind of conclude the summer months. We're getting ready to go into fall and, of course, winter, which is cold and flu season. And it's really time to shore up our immunity and strengthen our immunity so that we can protect ourselves from who knows what, right? There's pathogens everywhere all the time, all day. So it's important to keep our immune system strong. And she gives us some great tips in this week's episode about how we can get vitamin D, about supplements that we can take, about food sources of vitamin D. And in fact, one of the sources of vitamin D that I really, really love, and it used to be used in like the 1930s, was cod liver oil. And cod liver oil has over 1,300 IUs of vitamin D. And of course, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So, cod liver oil, although it is pretty, it's not the most exciting thing to taste or feel in your mouth if you don't like that oily kind of texture in the back of your throat, which to me is pretty disgusting. But the benefits of cod liver oil are amazing, and it's been used as an old world remedy for a lot of things. And you can look it up, ask Google about it, and you can just supplement throughout the winter with cod liver oil, and that's just one way that you can get your vitamin D in the winter. Obviously, our bodies need sunlight, which is how we kind of get vitamin D. And Dr. Food, Dr. Julia Mason, talks about other sources of, like food sources of vitamin D, and how vitamin D and omega-3s, not omega-6s. And that's a really important distinction. So you'll have to listen into the podcast this Friday and hear what she has to say about it, because it's some really good tips, really good information. So I hope that you listen in, and I hope that you share the episode with someone that you love, because, we don't know how long we're going to be dealing with the impact of the coronavirus, right? We're coming into cold and flu season, and so it's really important to think about our individual health and wellness, right? As the temperatures cool down, as our immune systems, potentially, are introduced to new and other pathogens, it's just really important to shore up our immunity. And having or not being deficient in vitamin D, because most of us, unfortunately, are deficient in vitamin D, according to Dr. Food. And you'll just hear more about that on the podcast episode this week. So thank you for everyone who's already listening in. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, do it. Do it right now. It really helps me out. It helps with the algorithm. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, you can do that on your favorite podcast platform, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Acast, you name it, all of them. Or you can listen to the podcast episodes on foodslang.com. You can also support the podcast, because that's really important as well. And I appreciate every single one of you who has supported the podcast by either listening in, by linking up with me on social media at Foodslang on all of the social platforms, by subscribing to this channel. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to support me in that way, head over to patreon.com/Foodslang. You can make a one-time donation on the website. You can buy something good on the website. In fact, I'm sure you know by now that I did an episode with Marjorie Wildcraft talking about growing your own groceries, growing your own food, And that's another way that you can support me and support yourself, really, by growing your own food and making it possible for you to get the nutrients that you need that are free. Your food is free from chemical exposure, at least in large part. At least it's not coming out of the food supply chain where there are contaminants. And if you're a regular listener to the podcast, then you probably realize by now that there's so much that we don't know about what's happening in our food supply chain. And I'm so grateful to be able to share what I'm learning and what I know and what I'm finding out with you. And I hope that you continue the conversation with me on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. And that's really it. Thanks again for listening in. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe to this channel, click the notifications bell, and until the next time, remember to eat clean, eat healthy, love your food, and I'll see you on the other side of the plate. Ciao.